Assalamu alaikum and welcome to everyone joining us for Sunday Night Live. And as you'll know, if you're in the UK or Europe, it's not the evening, it's not our usual slot, but we're honored to be joined by Peter Gould from Australia. So that's the reason for the slight change in the time. But he's a guest that's well worth changing the time for, and it's someone that I've been wanting to speak to for a long time. So Peter Gould is joining us from Sydney, and Peter Gould is actually, do you know what? I said I'm not going to do a bio. I said I'm not going to do your intro, so I'm going to let Peter introduce himself.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and great to be with you. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, sorry, my time zone in Australia can kind of put people out, especially if you're in the UK or Europe. So really great to be here. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, I've a little bit of a last couple of decades. I grew up in Australia, became interested in Islam in my late teens, and became Muslim when I was about 20. At the same time, or just before, I had been exploring the path of design and graphic design, and started studying that, and then freelancing in that career. And the last kind of 20 years of, I think of it as a sort of a interconnection or intersection of those two journeys. So exploring creativity and design, and growing a company and building products, and having that whole kind of trajectory. And at the same time, being on a spiritual path, exploring Islam, spending time with different scholars, and going through different seasons of life. And now I have 3 kids. Back then, had a lot of other kinds of questions. So alhamdulillah, now I'm very fortunate. I'm based in Australia at the moment, but have a company that's also based in Dubai, Indonesia, and parts of the Middle East. And yeah, day to day, it's a intersection of all of those things. So that was my. I hope have I covered enough there. Is that enough, Imran? Or we'll unpack some more, I'm sure.
I'll throw in. I said before that I would, if I felt Peter was being too humble, I'd throw in a few more. So Peter, you're actually everyone says they're award-winning, but Peter is actually an award-winning. You actually have an award. So I thought I'd mention that. So how did you get? So how did you get into design, and was it something that did you have a creative side from a young age, or is it something that happened later in life, or what's the story?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So I think if you've got any creatives in the in the community, or anyone watching, but even someone that doesn't consider themselves creative, but we all are. It's important to know. Often when we get older and we start thinking, oh, I'm not the creative type, I can't draw, I'm not into the visual, but we're all gifted that. We all have that imagination, that capacity. So but I definitely had that, and I embraced that as I started to explore a design path. So I enrolled in a design degree, straight out of high school, and just loved it, embraced it really quickly. And it was around that time, it was the late 90s, early 2000s. So don't know if anyone listening was around at that time, but if you're into things like emerging technology and computers and design at that time, was an exciting time, because there was early internet, it was before social media, it was before YouTube, and there's a lot of experimentation and digital kind of possibilities being explored. So I started building websites for people and designing logos and exploring all of that type of stuff around that time. And so that led to just freelancing and starting to get work and create different kind of creative products, and things like back then it was things like Flash, where you create little animations. So I really got excited about that path. At the same time, kind of in parallel to that, I had a bit of a different journey, thinking about what's the purpose of all this, what's the meaning, and probably we can unpack that journey a little bit. But in terms of the kind of creative path, that trajectory is just kind of continued. It's just, more people involved and different variety of clients. But alhamdulillah, I was able to travel and live in different locations as well. So that kind of opened up, I guess, the curiosity and learning from different people. So over time, a big part of the journey was, it's kind of like I would work and freelance as much as I could, and then basically save up, spend it all on as much as I could on travel. And my wife and I would spend time in, spend a month in Morocco, or back then we were able to explore places like Syria and sometimes in Lebanon or Turkey, And that sort of exposure and understanding to the richness and the beauty of that traditional understanding of design and Islamic design was just quite profound, I guess, influence on my understanding. So I had come from more of a traditional type of, not traditional, contemporary graphic design, Western understanding of, advertising and graphic design, and that's sort of the world of product design, digital. But when you walk around the Alhambra Palace, or you go to certain buildings in Damascus, and you see the majestic calligraphy and tiling, and there's a different mindset of why design, why practice, that artistry was inviting people to God, to contemplation, to think and to reflect and in being presence. It wasn't for selling and trying to get people to buy this thing and promote this thing. It was a different purpose. So I started borrowing, I guess, some more of that understanding that became more of a theme in the kind of design work I was trying to do, was a little bit more in alignment with more meaningful work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so most of you travel to the Middle East. Was this after becoming Muslim, or?
Yeah, so I actually had said Shahada in Australia when I was 20, and around leading up to that time, I had come across the Muslims and had sort of a bit of a journey over a couple of years. There's actually a few sort of threads to that we could unpack, but by the time I actually had started traveling and spent time in, initially actually it was soon enough to get married, my wife and I went to Alhambra Palace in Spain, and then Morocco, and that was sort of a bit of a milestone of like, okay, I'm on this path, but it felt like that opened. There were a lot of openings that were coming just from starting to explore those places, and then meeting the people that were the traditional practitioners and getting a bit deeper there. So, but yes, all that travel, I was already Muslim, but I felt like I really, at that point, started to appreciate, alhamdulillah, subhanallah, I'm part of this greater story. And, I'm just even smaller and smaller speck of dust in this grand story of this creative legacy, this beautiful tradition that has existed for hundreds of years. And, try to then think about, well, what's my role in that, and how can I learn from, these great masters before us.
Amazing. You alluded to, like, from a design point of view, that you went to all of these different places, and you saw like almost like a different design ethos compared to kind of Western ideas of art. Is that correct? Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, if I guess it was just starting to appreciate that I'm still around very early 20s. So I guess even at that time, even in my exposure to design, graphic design, it was all in popular culture. So it's like things like magazine covers, album covers, packaging, product design, advertising, digital, new emerging kind of websites. It was all very exciting, and it felt like a lot of energy, and it was just a fun and exciting space to be in. And I was working for some big advertising agencies, like Saatchi and Ogilvy, like big, I was doing freelancing for some well-known kind of companies, and so sort of in that world. But at the same time, there's this parallel kind of experience where, yeah, I would literally tell like the client, let's say that Ogilvy is like, oh, I'm going to Lebanon for a month, and they're like, what are you, like, what, like, isn't there a war there? Like, what are you talking about? And there was this disconnect. I'm going to Morocco for a few weeks over the Christmas break. Like, okay, yeah, like that sounds exotic. So I had, it was just an interesting time where I did feel like for a while I was living, I think internally not separate lives, but in terms of, I didn't have, I guess, the confidence to kind of really explain I mean, or not necessarily the relationship where I would just comfortably want to explain to someone, well, I've come along to this thing called Islam. Now, I know you've just heard about this whole 9/11 thing, which had just happened the year before, but my experience is actually this. And like, so anyway, we can explore that as well. And in the end, I kind of lost all of that work because I stopped taking certain parts of it. I was being very selective, and alhamdulillah, a lot of other doors opened, but there were some big projects that I just couldn't take on I remember one case when, it was one of those clients and like, okay, we've got this great client. Yeah, I think Peter will be great for it. You can manage it. You guys are really good. And it's like, okay. And it's this big champagne brand. It's launching and I'm like, oh no. So I was like, okay, how do I was like, okay, I can't do it. They're like, what? Like, so yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of other people that, exploring Islam or new Muslims. There's interesting conversations we all have to navigate. Anyway, but kind of going back to your question, spending time, you spend a month in the old Medina in Morocco or the old cities, even at that time, this is around 2004, 5, 6, Medina, Mecca it was the older kind of version before the big renovation. And you did feel, I'm sure anyone who's been there, like you're in a different, sometimes a different place, different time, and the appreciation and the richness of the experiential nature of coming into some of these traditional works of you appreciate this is real design. This is designed from the heart. Like this is design you feel. And in fact, some of our teachers will tell us that the design invites us to contemplation, and it's designed to affect the state of our hearts. And that was traditionally understood, and now we have to sort of recover that a little more consciously to think about, well, they're designing with niyyah, with ahsan, and bringing that ikhlas into design. And nowadays that we are exploring, well, what from that understanding can we apply to what we're trying to build? Does that work on if you're building an app or if you're building a product? Like, what are the principles you might apply from those traditional times to what we're doing today?
That's incredible. I mean, and how does that? So you're taking like an Islamic concept, like spiritual excellence, ihsan, for example, and you're applying that to your actual design principles. And I know you have a course, right? You have a course on this specific thing. What does that actually look like? Let's say you're designing an app. How do you take those principles and translate that into something that results in a tangible, meaningful design?
Yeah, that's it. Well, that's precisely the last, I think the last 20 years kind of casually trying to explore the answers to that. And then more specifically in the last maybe 5 years, I've more directly been asking people about this, interviewing people, and some of the teachers and practitioners that have had a lot more experience and exposure to and maybe academic kind of depth around some of these questions. I think it's there's not a formula except there's some principles that we can apply to whatever it might be doing. So let's say you work on an app, or you have this idea for a startup, or you have this kind of entrepreneurial streak of like, I really want to launch this company or try this thing. So what I found, and I think many others might have, that a lot of the popular literature, of course, and podcasts and books that we might read, for example, in the entrepreneurial space or the design space, they might be very good and very technical, and they will talk about things like purpose. But at least I found when I was really going deep into Islam and spending time with teachers and trying to understand, there's such a depth and richness, and we're talking about this incredible tradition that just has, it's bahran, like it's oceans of knowledge, and so I didn't feel that the entrepreneurial design kind of literature, was really borrowing and doing justice anyway. It felt very surface level. So it's really the program I've been teaching, The Heart of Design, and these interviews I've been doing, is really, an attempt to bring that richness to it. So I have these 6 principles that many Muslims would know very well, or if you're coming to Islam, I'm sure already be hearing about them, but a simple one being niyyah, intentionality. So what does that look like when you're building an app? And for example, many apps start with the questions like, well, how many users can I get? How fast can I grow this? How quickly can I get investment? How quickly can I 10x my money, and so on? They're quite typical questions that investors would want to ask about. That's fine, but I think there's a more holistic set of questions that we want to ask. So if you're building that app, let's start a bit further. What's my personal intention in that? What is the hopes I have for it long term? What is the state of people that I'm designing the app for? Am I going to I'm going to distract them? Am I going to steal their more attention from them? Am I creating more noise in the day? Am I just creating like another thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or what value, what am I thinking about that person's state? Am I thinking about the app, you know, is it calling them to something good? So there's actually so much we can borrow from our traditional understanding just in that one word, niya. And then there's a whole series of other words. What's the role of baraka? You know, is there a chance to think more actively about, well, what would bring baraka into this project? Or even the idea of an amana. We all are gifted talents and access to opportunities and technologies and networks, and you know, we're all here together on this call. It's an amana, like it's a trust, it's a gift to us. And if you're in the design or entrepreneurial space, well, you know, who are we serving? What are we doing that for? Ultimately, how are we using all those gifts? So that's this idea of heart-centered design, is trying to apply those spiritual aspirations directly into the products we're building, the clients we're working for, and so on, inshallah.
Well, it's so amazing, like, and understanding a bit about what the tech world is and the statistics that they use, to judge success, and their even their starting point, their foundation, right from the off, it has all other kinds of nefarious purposes. So to see you kind of completely going against the grain and really asking questions that maybe the big tech companies don't even consider, like they would never have thought. And you think if they can succeed with their objectives, then when someone has a godly purpose, then surely Allah's gonna grant success to something that's done with a beautiful intention. And
Yeah, inshallah. I think just having that, bringing that more holistic kind of lens to whatever our activities are, and yeah, specifically if it's about a business we're trying to launch, or even if it's a next chapter of our career we're trying to explore. Yeah, it's a set of understandings that, you know, it's almost a set of questions that just kind of help elevate our questions or bring more, yeah, a bit more clarity around. Okay, you know, because what I found, you know, and maybe others, is that we kind of understand our careers over here and our vocation, our training, but you know, and our Islamic studies are over here. Of course, our values we always apply and live by, and it's not just a book and a knowledge you learn. Oh, great, that's the definition of niyyah. Great, I'm going to put it on the shelf. No, it's very experiential. But I you know, it was sometimes difficult for me personally over, you know, especially early in the journey, to find teachers, texts, resources that really directly linking at these two. So, you know, I'd often ask teachers, you know, things like, well, and I would feel very sometimes feel awkward or uncomfortable asking things like, well, is it okay to like make dua for, you know, a really successful company that has impact and it employs a lot of people and does a lot of good in the world, like, you know, and if, you know, and have aspirations for, like, you know, a certain level of material comfort, and like, but at the same, you know, so like I feel like, can I even ask that, or do I just feel so, is it so needy and so dunyawi to ask those kind of things? And so I would ask teachers those kind of questions and get an interesting mix of answers. And now I think there's a lot more content like that. There's a lot more scholars and thinkers who are giving great, who have that experience of knowing the context and knowing, you know, how many of us live and we watch films, many of us will play video games, or many of us are, you know, in this world of media, and we have different streaming services. So in that world of a lot of digital media, digital content, we just, it's just part of how we live and communicate and work. So we have to understand more specifically how Islam guides and applies, you know, to those kind of decisions and platforms that we interact with.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. You mentioned something really, really interesting there, is that so when you were asking these questions, which I mean, it's very, really, really brave and really commendable, really, to ask the questions in the first place, because that's half of the struggle sometimes, I'm sure, is like, is it even okay for me to ask a question? Is it okay for me to ask this question? And you said you received a mix of answers. Now, I think one of the I can imagine one of the problems that face converts or people who are exploring Islam is, okay, we hear this term about scholarship, and that's it's almost quite new, you know, and I think you realize that Islam relies and derives so much from the intellectual history of the past, And obviously that's a continuing tradition. But you said that you received a mix of answers. How did you navigate those answers? Because I'm assuming you received like both ends of the spectrum and kind of everything in between. So how did you navigate that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something that it's for all of us ongoing. You know, we of course we have our source of truth in the Quran, and we have the you know, the teachings of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then, you know, around that, you know, derived from that, informed by that, of course, is just, you know, a broad spectrum of scholarship and thinkers in different languages, different cultural contexts, which gives it, you know, I always, you know, appreciated, you know, Dr. Omar Farooq Abdullah as in his great text, you know, The Culture Imperative, and in the early pages, he, you know, shares this anecdote from one of his teachers, a West African scholar, and explains Islam is like a clear, pure waters, and wherever it flows, it reflects the color of the bedrock over which beneath it flows. So when that water, that beautiful clear water of Islam flows into China, it looks Chinese. When it flows to Turkey, it, you know, it reflects the Turkishness of the bedrock underneath. And I felt, you know, that was sort of a powerful understanding. It wasn't really until I actually started traveling more, and then I lived in California for about a year, San Francisco, and had a lot of exposure to places like Tatlif and you know, scholarship that really understood. Like I could see the Californian bedrock underneath that, if you like, and the mix of the great diversity within that. And so I think the answering your question in terms of navigating that is starting to, you know, you've got to have a you've got to both have your cerebral kind of rational understanding of like, okay, yeah, that those kind of checks out, but so much of it is also just from your heart and feeling that and being comfortable actually, which is almost deprogramming a little bit from the purely kind of in my case, you know, high school and university, very linear trajectory of like, you know, look, faith doesn't play a role in that. It's sort of like it's not a, it doesn't really count for important reasoning and decisions. It's sort of the narrative. Whereas, so you journey through that and you'll realize that, well, you know, I can't, when you go to Mecca, if you have that chance, and when you go to Medina, it's not a rational formula that I can say, well, you know, you know, I can't write a PhD and then prove with references, well, here is that experience. I can't just say, well, look at all these biology and my neurons, and that's why I feel this. It's just something so much more profound happening that we all can experience in different ways. So it's just that experiential nature of it is using your heart, as cliche as it might sound in English. That helps you navigate. And being around great, having good sahba, people that are connected to scholars that are trusted, that you know, there's enough consensus around from different places that you know that you're learning from people that you know are trusted and they've spent years studying, you know, years and years studying, and are informing you, not just someone that, you know, found a few YouTube videos and now trying to tell you what you should do or not do. Like, you know, I'm sure you're all familiar with the challenges in this era for that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like there's almost too much knowledge. It's almost too easily accessible. Like when so we have a Telegram group for new beginnings, and all kind of students who've done our courses, past or present, they're all in there. So there's about 150 people in there, and often people will ask an issue and someone will say, oh, I've Googled it, or I found this answer on YouTube. And that can obviously be quite very difficult. It can be quite dangerous at times, even to navigate it, because it's not that there isn't just one set answer, and it is kind of what there is an element of kind of, well, what works for you, and this idea of kind of ask your heart. This is from literally the words of the Prophet, peace be upon him, right? He said, you know, istafti qalbak, you know, ask, question your heart. Okay, so that's kind of navigating these different these different opinions that are out there. Did you find that some of the answers you received just didn't? Why did they not sit right with you? The ones that didn't, what was it about it that didn't sit right?
Yeah, I think consulting your heart, yeah, but also, finding groups of people that you do feel like you're in the right company. And I when I first started thinking about Islam, for example, before I was Muslim, very early on, I actually ended up kind of connecting with different Muslim groups around Sydney, Australia, where I was. And it was such within for 1 year. I spent around a year, 18 months to sort of really start thinking and taking seriously this idea that maybe this is actually real, and it kind of grew over time, and just the diversity of experience within that. Some very conservative kind of groups where I just immediately felt that okay, like this is not, I'm just not used to this, the social dynamics so different, the the kind of things I'm being told that are okay and not okay, opening up different questions, and then spending time with different kind of groups from different backgrounds and different places. And I think also just where I was as well, seeing the different just clearly I could sort of sense that there were also a lot of different cultural influences that had started maybe informing different opinions that weren't necessarily matching with some of the resources I was reading and getting access to, or listening to. At the time, it was CDs and DVDs from people like Sheikh Hamza in the US. Yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, there's lots of little examples. Like, I mean, the first time I went into a mosque, for example, first time I went, I'm very nervous about it, and I went in and I kind of found my place, and before I was Muslim, and I was just very self-conscious, and because I didn't really know anyone. I knew one person that kind of took me there, but they were a little bit chatting with someone, and someone comes up to me, and the first person, he sits me down, and kind of beautifully dressed, but in my mind it's like, wow, you look like you're from Aladdin or something. Like I was from a very different I just had not had a lot of exposure to people looking and dressing and sounding like this around me. So, and this guy is like, okay, nice, okay, you got me, Peter. Okay, okay, have you thought of a new Muslim name for yourself? Right, that was his first question. I was like, what? I was like, I didn't even. I was like, okay, like what is Islam exactly, and what do I need a different name for? And like it was not the right question to ask. That fortunately, I had again a different mix of people that would ask, I think, questions that are a little more appropriate to what I was thinking about at the time. But I'm sure everyone on this chat has this, different kind of versions of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had Mustafa Davis on just over a year ago, actually, and he had some really, really crazy stories. One topic that we didn't cover actually with Mustafa Davis is this concept of art and how it fits in with Islamic identity, and I guess in a way, has your art ever been in anything controversial in terms of the content or the actual? Because I know with film, for example, with Mustafa Davis or musicians, there isn't an element of controversy with it. But have you ever felt yourself in that situation?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I fortunately there's been no major drama. There's been no huge life-changing type of confrontations or anything like that. But I've definitely I've had many experiences and exchanges with people where there's a real sense of internal dilemma about how much, like early on, for example, like I had just finished my whole design degree, which is design and innovation. For example, innovation was like a scary word that Muslims did not like to talk about when I was looking at Islam. Like just the idea of innovation, like because the immediate assumption was, oh, you're innovating in the deen, you're creating, we're going to pray 7 times a day, and like, oh, like we're like,
yeah,
and very different from my understanding. Like, no, innovation is about creating and solving the needs of people using technology. And it doesn't take too long to look back to Islamic history, and there was always a strong element of innovation. And for example, calligraphy, Islamic calligraphy didn't just arrive in its final form. It took centuries learning, iterating, improving, innovating, and the journey. And then you see in the Ottoman, the Uthmani Diwani script, you see centuries later after. It's stunning, but that takes time. Same with other forms in Islamic art and architecture. I think there's a journey that takes over time. So, but there was this idea that art, like Islamic art, is just about calligraphy, tiling, architecture, maybe a bit of floral mosaic, illuminated manuscripts, and pottery, ceramics. That's Islamic art. Like it was sort of. And I still to this day, especially because a lot of the Westernness, I think, is like, well, that's Islamic art. Like that's the forms that it takes, and like full stop. The book's closed, right? Like that's it. I think the principles that of Islamic art, bringing people to a place of remembrance and a state of awe and gratefulness, and to a place of dhikr, like, which is, I think, what Islamic art is supposed to do. That can take many different kind of forms. And why can't it be done in graffiti style? Why can't it be why can't you have a video game experience that has that same intent to invite people back to that better place? Why can't you have more digital experiences? Or can you have them in VR, for example? And I'm not ever going to try and say that playing a video game or being in the metaverse is the same as walking in a great mosque in Cordoba. Like I wouldn't make that claim. But the intention of the design is to use the context of the day, the contemporary experience of the day. It's an opportunity. And I think if we're not creating that content and those experiences, then we should just be mindful that all the big corporations will, and a lot of our young people will just have only whatever's there. So I'm trying to navigate these things. I'm not trying to claim that, I know the right answers, but in terms of, little controversies, not really, but a lot of my initial digital work and photography was very kind of safe. It was looking at just maybe more contemporary graphic ways of, different kind of treatments, and using kind of urban design or graphic design influences in a kind of Western aesthetic of. And so that's, I think, in the mid 2000s, there weren't too many people doing that kind of stuff that I could see. So opened lots of conversations. But yeah, the odd thing here or there. I definitely remember one of my early pieces was it was like a nice vector illustration of a woman in hijab, and she had big sunglasses, and I just put the phrase "undercover" on it, right? And I don't know, this is the first year or two of Facebook, and just she looked like this cool spy like sort of character. I don't know, and I just thought it was a fun thing to do. And then a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's cool, whatever." And then I remember starting getting a few messages like, "Ah, oh, brother, like hijab is not meant to be cool, you can't really talk about like, just, I'm like, really?" Like, so you get all that stuff, and there's forever that invitation to people to take issue with whatever you might build. And you just got to learn to pick your battles and know your own intention very clearly about what you're creating.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. And it sounds like you've navigated that journey pretty successfully, mashallah. So you alluded to a couple of things there. So in addition to your work in design and photography and branding, I know you're very much into tech, and you're an early adopter, I think. Can you talk us through some of the most interesting projects you've worked on, or from that point of view?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. I mean, I think, as someone who's interested in design and technology and experimenting and early adopting, has just been in my, I guess, DNA, or my interest and personality, particularly, running the team, running the studio. So alhamdulillah, we have about 25 designers globally that in our team. And so often we're thinking about, or getting asked to think about some emerging things. So right now there's a lot of conversation around the metaverse, around NFTs, around Web3. And so we're exploring that. And early on, I've always been interested in VR and AR and things like that. For example, when Google Glass came out. I don't know if you remember, it was this thing, they created this quite clumsy kind of, thing, but I was able to get into that early group of people with it, and actually made, for example, this Quranic heads up display, right? So the idea, we wrote coded this, the whole Quran onto it. So it's kind of like the idea is if you're trying to learn a surah, it would it would just kind of prompt you like a teleprompter with all of the eyes, and just kind of flow. And that's also an experiment, but of course, naturally you just gotta, you'll find different opinions on, can you do that, are you supposed to do that, is that the right thing or not. So you've got to be aware of, okay, that's where being attached to the right scholarship and companionship will keep guiding you. But yeah, very interesting time with blockchain and NFTs at the moment, and a lot of conversation around the idea of Muslims in the metaverse. What is this? There's a lot of hype, a lot of noise, a lot of potential to go off the path completely. But I think I'm more naturally exploring where is the wholesomeness in it, where is the goodness in it, because if Muslims are not actively building, contributing, and asking the right questions and debating those things, then we just find ourselves, or our young people, using all that content, using all that tech, playing all these games, having all these apps, and no Muslim voices in creating that. So I think as creative communities, we've got to be active thinking about it, but just being conscious of a lot of that can be a big distraction and big noise as well.
So what does the metaverse mean to you? It's a buzzword that a lot, we're hearing like big CEOs talking about it, like Walmart. I'm like, did you even know what the metaverse is? So what do you understand by it? What is it? What does it mean?
It's sort of a loose, at this point, pretty loose. It can be a different collection of different definitions, and it's a really convergence of some emerging technology together, and then people kind of speculating on, what does that mean, from the wildly speculative to it's like going to be like Ready Player One, or it's going to be like this or that. And I think Muslims, it's quite common to just have a reactionary kind of that's just completely all distraction. It's going to take us away from what's important. We should just be really careful. And I think we should listen to those voices, because there is already so much distraction and so much noise. But I don't think we should be ignorant of just being aware of it and exploring, well, what is the role, just as we were talking about Islamic art evolving over time. Well, is there a space for using metaverse technologies to invite people? I think of it as an interface or a window to actually come to know Islam and come to know beneficial knowledge through those things. So I know that, for example, Imam Sahib Webb has his VR halaqa. He started. I've been doing more meetings. We've been some meetups in the metaverse, just in using VR kind of tech, and it's quite immersive. In an era where everything the last 2 years has been very Zoom based, it's nice to actually be more in VR with that. So that's one part of the technology, and there's a few others like NFTs, which is about digital ownership and kind of like a digital ownership of certain digital assets. That's fascinating, especially for creatives and entrepreneurs. Big opportunity to make things and build small communities, rather than just going to the traditional investment path of going to seed or angel investors and VCs. I think the new model, new ways of getting support and financial empowerment for your ideas, which is great. And I wish it was kind of around 10 years ago, but yeah, we're exploring a couple of projects at the moment. One of them hopefully launching in the next week, which will have a bit of an NFT component called Tales of Khayal. So that's an online comic series that, been working on this. There's a bit of a hidden project for the last 12 months. It's exploring this site. Do you want me to unpack that a little? I didn't mean to turn it into.
I would love to hear about it. Yeah.
So I'll talk briefly, and then you can feel free to pull it apart. But so some years ago, one of my teachers, Dr. Samir Mahmood, he's a lecturer there at Cambridge in the UK with yourselves, and I've befriended him over the last few years and learned, mashallah, he's a wealth of knowledge. And he introduced me to the concept of Islamic term khayal. And khayal has quite a rich meaning, but we think of it as a type of spiritual imagination. So it's not just a visual imagination where, you know, we can imagine forms and shapes and colors. Khayal has a much more spiritual quality about it. And it's, for example, he explained it as, well, if you, we're told from the Hadith traditions, for example, you know, worship God as if you see God, but know if you don't that he sees you. And so the key phrase is that worship as if you see God, but we don't imagine a shape or a form, or, you know, we're taught, you know, not to imagine in that way. So then how do we imagine it? It's from our khayal. It's using this other faculty that traditional Muslim creatives would have an understanding of. That's very, I think, profound and rich. So this concept we've been developing is a series of comics, digital comics. First one is due for release this week, and it explores these khayalis, these different Muslims set in the future in about 50 years in the metaverse, and looking at the potentials of what's this very virtual, increasingly digital future that many of us are sort of experiencing more, whether we want to or not. We're kind of, you know, being pulled that direction in work, in education, in lots of things, especially during a pandemic. So what is the role of Islamic spirituality in that? What is the role of imagination? So the whole series is kind of exploring that, and just in a kind of interactive way.
Amazing. Oh, I hope it goes well, inshallah, and I hope all your intentions come to fruition, and then some, inshallah. So
yeah,
I can see like your output. Like I think a lot of what you do is to create an alternative, right? To in an already popular medium. And I think kids. I remember Kids of the Ummah. Was that an app that you had, or was it the
Yeah, that's a good memory. Yeah, that I think was one of our first kids apps over 10 years ago. Actually, I got the Facebook pop-up going, hey, you know, this is your memory from 11 years ago or something. And so
Yeah.
I was living in San Francisco when the first when iPads just came out, the first tablets. And I remember going on that first day, lining up. You know, it was a big thing at the time. Now it seems sort of like a little bit silly, but at the time it was pretty exciting to have this tablet device, and just immediately think, well, what can do this? As soon as I saw my young kids, you know, just interacting, I was like, this is going to be young kids are going to be massively addicted to these things once tablets are mainstream. It was so quick that they're just so that hyper stimulation. Of course, within 10 years, we see that. And even, for example, there's a book called Ruined by Design, where it talks about how all of this effect and this technology has drastically reduced our attention span, lots of other, you know, dangers we know about from that. But it was an attempt to think about, okay, well, in this space, what content are we creating? Especially as parents, we're looking for wholesome content. We're looking for experiences that, look, the reality is we're not, you know, living in a traditional Medina in Fez away from technology. We're not living in that, even though sometimes I wish we were. We're in an environment where these technologies exist, and we protect, you know, we want to safeguard our kids away from the worst of it, and keep them with no screen time or low screen time. But when they do interact, when they watch something, what are we creating as a creative community? What have we created for our kids to learn about beneficial knowledge? And there's been a series of these experiments. Kids in Ummah was one. My favorite was Salam Sisters. So we created this dolls line, where, alhamdulillah, we had a lot of success, and you know, we sold out all of the first series of those. And they were physical dolls, like real dolls that you could hold, but they had a digital app part as well. So yeah, a bit of a theme has always been, Imran, trying to explore what products, brands, you know, trying to bring the right messaging or representation that we hope to see.
I went on your the studio website, Peter Gould Studio, and I noticed that it's you're I'll just read the kind of tagline here, that you're very specifically, so we help you design meaningful connections with Muslim audiences. So you've really kind of gone out there and specified and kind of made yourselves available as the Muslim design agency, which is interesting. because I see a lot of artists, they want to keep it quite neutral, which is understandable. You know, there are many intentions that someone can have for making something neutral and like spiritual, etc., to appeal to a wider audience. But you kind of really honed in on this Muslim market, and you know, it's understandable given the size of the of the Muslim population globally. Um, and do you think a lot of work? Do you think the corporate world or the consumer world has really woken up to the power of the Muslim dollar or the Muslim pound or whatever? Or do you think there's still a lot of work to be done?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot, I think, a little bit to unpack there. And, you know, I've had a lot of these threads of conversation over the last, 10, 15 years on these kind of questions, which is important to always be challenged, to be critiqued, to, be open to learn and together, having that, collection of people who are exploring this. But even, I'll say this, going back to our conversation earlier at the beginning, it would have been much easier just to have a sort of quote conventional mainstream, for me, any advertising type of agency doing digital marketing, pushing things, selling things, especially around that time, when all that early tech was and social media just beginning. And I actually at the time had two separate kind of faces to my design team. We're a very small team back then, but we had mainstream work, and we did a lot of government work, we did corporate work. We had, it's quite successful in getting more kinds of inquiries, that could easily just, but at the same time, you kind of, your heart gravitates towards the kind of work it thinks it should be doing. And so, I had my first Muslim client, and things sort of went okay, and I was like, okay, yeah, this actually, like, this is a possibility. Like, I can actually do more work like this. And there weren't too many Muslims at the time that you could Google, Muslim graphic designer, a Muslim website, 15 years ago. Many of them, well, the few that we could, are good friends now. But my second Muslim client was a sheikh. They never paid me. And I laugh now, but the point is, I got a taste for, okay, a lot of the challenges that I wasn't facing from government and airlines and, Vodafone and Colgate and all these other big clients. And yet, the heart is inclined towards something, and doors would open, and, I started traveling, and I just basically felt that, there's something very beautiful about doing something that is more wholesome and more in line with your values, that you just start, you just gravitate towards that, and other things kind of melted away. And then we just kind of I kept on that path over the last 10 years. And sort of always a mini roller coaster of everything that comes with trying to grow a team in a business like that. But Alhamdulillah, has been such a beautiful journey. Got to work with many wonderful, inspiring people. Been able to launch things that people write and send messages and photos of their kids playing with the thing, or parents. And actually as well, this broader understanding of success isn't just the $1 billion startup or the huge, the big executive senior position. Success could be just dropping your children to school on the way to your office, and then doing, good work for good people. And it's enough for, to sustain your family and help them grow. That's beautiful. Like, there's something very profound and simple in that. So alhamdulillah, having that path has been really such a joy. And
that's really, mashallah, it's a really beautiful message. Yeah. It goes back to where do you start, like your starting point, right? If your metrics for success are those things, then everything that comes on top of that will be in accordance with that initial starting point. A question that we've had, I'm obviously not very technical. What age is the comic for, and what's the name again, and what are the subliminal messages, and how do they access?
Yeah, that's great. No, thanks for asking about it. So, well, it's been in kind of submarine mode for the last 12 months while I've been working on it. So it's finally time to submerge and share a little more. So I can share the URL and with everyone shortly. But you could, you'll see it, but it's Tales, as in story, Tales of Khayal. which is in English KHAYAAL.com, Tales of Khayal. We're actually going to be putting on Launch Good this week, which is a big crowdfunding platform. Yeah, that's the one. And so you won't find too much online yet, but within about a week or so, inshallah, you'll find more. It's sort of aimed at a slightly more mature, maybe, mid-late teenage to young adult audience. We found there's a big emptiness in that space for Muslim content. There's plenty of children's media now. There's plenty of Omar and Hannah and, Noor Kids, with lots of digital content and books. That wasn't the case maybe 10 years ago when, a few of us were experimenting, but that's well and truly on its way, in terms of accessible content, books. There's just such a flourish and abundance of Muslim children's books and authors were beautiful, but we found there's not much for teenagers and young adults. And alhamdulillah, I just saw a chat message there. Yeah, no problem. I'll let Imran be our host, but so it's a bit of an experiment though, like most of our projects. So we have client projects, which are most of our work, and then we always do 1 or 2 in-house experiments to see, kind of what people are interested in. I'm not too sure how this will go. I'm very curious to see whether people will support it, or as one of my friends said, who founded Noor Kids, he said, look, I think people are going to love it, Peter, but I don't know if they're going to love it now or in 5 years. So that's also been the case with sometimes it's just we're not at the right time. So I've got to just kind of go with the flow a little bit there.
Yeah. But, even I'm sure whoever does it second, third, fourth, they're always going to be looking to that first, like, who are the first guys, like, and how was their response? So I think there's even just being the first to do it is such a big service, I think, and to be brave enough to try something new. And alhamdulillah, fortunate enough to be able to do that, and not kind of rely just on that success, kind of having all your eggs in that one basket. So I think there's a huge reward, I hope, and service in just being the first, because then it gives people, 1, inspiration, and 2, ideas. And if I'm sure you've been the trailblazer in many different things, and inshallah, hopefully this is one of them, because I'm not someone who's been into comics myself, but I don't think there's much out there. I'm guessing there isn't much out there in terms of Muslim comics.
Yeah, well, just going back one step yet. I mean, look, alhamdulillah, we never claim, the thing about if you're going to live by these sort of heart-centered principles we talk about, we don't want to make claims that, like, we're pioneers, or we're like, hey, like, it's all an amana, it's all a gift. If Allah puts in your journey openings and opportunities, or sometimes doors close, and you realize there's a hikmah, wisdom for that later. It's part of that journey. And so I kind of think of our entrepreneurial journey as it's transformational. It's not transactional. So you don't just like, okay, we do this equals that. It is. And as one of my and that's actually Dr. Abdullah Rothman gave me that bit of that insight. That's his phrase. But and another teacher of mine, Harun Sujic, was saying, well, just remember what you're working on. You think you're working on something, but it's actually working on you. So,
oh wow,
wow. I thought it was beautiful. So in the sense of something like this Khayal project, it's been a chance to, think about what intention, what do we think is the right thing to create, the right tone, the right content. It can't be too kind of campy and cheesy. It's got to be actually, for that audience, like, it's got to be a bit more real. It's got to have a bit of grittiness to it, but within the safe bounds of what kind of wholesome content is. So, and I forgot the second part of what you were saying, but alhamdulillah, it was thinking about comics maybe. So my hope actually for it, and not to share too widely, but we've actually built a couple of prototype games, video games for it. We've built a couple of demo levels in Unreal Engine, and my hope is to build Khayal into a proper 3D game. But I'm not going to share that too widely, because I don't want the expectation to be there, because everyone will think, oh, it's going to be the next Assassin's Creed or whatever. It's like, no, just relax. We're going to start with the world and see the reaction to that. Yeah, and I just see someone's put the URL in there. So thanks. Thank you, Rahima, for showing that.
Well, yeah, amazing. Mashallah. I'm so, honestly, alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful for that someone's doing this stuff. And I think it's like I said, I think it's really brave. I think it's very commendable. And I pray that Allah gives the project all the success and, gives makes your intentions come to fruition, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Anissa asks, my question is, I saw you were writing a book. Have you finished it, and what will it be about?
Yeah, thank you, Anissa. First of all, Anissa, if I'm not mistaken, that profile pic actually looks very close to one of the photos I took in Jerusalem. I don't know if that was intentional or it happens to be very similar to one that I took, but I just, alhamdulillah, I was in Jerusalem in 2006 and 7, and that photo, I'm 90% sure I took that photo anyway. Just I
Oh
don't know if
wow,
you happen to know that or not. Yeah, I just like I'm just happy to see it there. It's I had that in the
mashallah.
collection, and I did an event last year for UNHCR, and I had some of my old photographs raising some funds for Syria, and I talked about a number of those. So anyway, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I just happened to know that. Anyway, alhamdulillah, good. I had a good experience. Okay, all right, she knows about it. That's fine. I just
Mashallah.
thought it would make.
Amazing.
Um, so thank you, Anissa. So yes, so the book is, so a little early on we were talking about this Heart of Design program that I've been teaching. Although I must say I feel like I learn equally as much as I teach. Truly, it's the people that come to this program are very wonderful and inspiring. So I did that course I launched early last year, I think. Oh, anyway, we've had over 200, 250 people come through exploring these ideas, entrepreneurship, spirituality, design. And there's one currently at the moment. Where the book has come from was some of the experiences and learnings through that. But in particular, the interviews of people that I've done about 40 interviews in the last 3-4 years with all sorts of leaders, thinkers, Muslim or not, different background, and asking them what is the role of faith and spirituality in your design, in your startup, in your company. And it's basically the book is centered around these interviews. And then I've been writing on and off, pieces of that. Inshallah, this year it will come out. So thank you
Mashallah. Brilliant.
for asking about it. And there's another question there about the studio in Lebanon. Shall I go ahead, Imran, answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate that we do have a really cool studio in Beirut that I haven't visited in person yet, actually. But so my chief design officer, Case, he moved to Australia maybe 10 years ago, but he's from Lebanese background. And there's a really strong design community in Lebanon, especially out of the AUB, American University Beirut, who I actually got to know through when I was living in Dubai very well, like a few of the designers that had been involved there. It's a really strong kind of alumni. Anyway, so through my CDO, Chief Design Officer, he introduced me to some of his kind of basically friends and alumni in Beirut. And we started hiring them initially as freelancers to help out with some projects, and then just the quality of work, the dedication, and just ended up in succession of hiring 3, 4, now 5 people, setting up an office. And the second part of that is it's a really difficult situation in Lebanon at the moment. It's really it's this of course, unfortunately, always had political the geopolitics, which are complex, but just on the ground, the conditions are terrible. And we do hear this, but I'm hearing from my team and those on the ground that, alhamdulillah, having this kind of role, these jobs, getting paid in US dollars, having the office set up, alhamdulillah, I think it's been very helpful, at least for our group and their families. So obviously we're always aware of the situation and just being more mindful, but alhamdulillah, and also we've been able to help them travel to wherever they need, like if there's a project in Saudi or Dubai, we can, obviously they're in the region, the time zone's a bit more convenient. But I've only been to Beirut once, long time ago, but I hope to return and meet the team there, inshallah, in real life.
Mashallah, fantastic. Does anyone? I'm going to open it up for other questions now. Does anyone have any other questions for Peter? I mean, clearly, just whilst we're kind of getting any questions in, hopefully we can continue the conversation a little bit. Clearly, mashallah, you're doing a lot, and you have a lot of blessings in your time. To be able to do so much, alhamdulillah, it's really inspiring to see. Okay. Another question. Are you working on any projects for Ramadan?
Yes, great question. It is peak time for the design studio because alhamdulillah, we're booked out going into Ramadan. There's always, so much going on. I mean, this is going to be a cheesy answer, but the biggest project for Ramadan is always yourself, and working on, that's ironically though, as a design team doing a lot of projects connected to Muslim audiences, going into Ramadan can be very busy with work, and there is this sort of sometimes personal dilemma of like, okay, it's a time you need to pray for, look at the spiritual opportunity you have for transformation. And yet a lot of the work we do might be around communication. So yes, alhamdulillah, we do have several very cool projects, I think, this year. Probably can't really, I'm just thinking it's probably they're not baked enough to share what they are, but they're along the lines of things you might have seen us do in the past. Last year we made a mini game, a little free game for Ramadan, which was fun, like a little treasure hunt that was really fun and popular, called Ramadan Ready. So we might do a bit of a refresh of that. Just something, it was kind of like waiting for iftar, helping things around the house, go and find it. Just something very fun. But yeah, it's a special time. And what we have to be careful of, though, I think, is we've got to just be mindful of, we don't want that complete commercialization of Ramadan to turn, we don't want it to turn into like just a Christmas, like a glossy kind of, oh, we have, it's a time for buying, it's a time for playing games. It's not meant to be that. And we've got to be conscious of that. At the same time, we know there's a lot of consumption of media, of a lot of purchasing of gifts. So it's just trying to be mindful of what's your intention in that, and navigating always through, well, what's the potential to create something beneficial and wholesome, versus the potential of like just wasting a lot of time using the earth's resources, getting people to spend more money they don't need to, distracting them with more noise and games. So yeah, I think it's something that we're trying to look always, what's the right path there.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I thought I'd do 3 quick fire questions. What's your favorite film?
Oh man, there's too many, but I'm just gonna go with the Empire Strikes Back. It's the Star Wars, one of the second Star Wars films.
Oh, fantastic. Are you a big Star Wars fan?
I do love Star Wars. Yeah, I definitely love the world building, stories and design. But yeah, my family and I and my kids are all into it, and it's definitely a big fan.
Amazing. I went to a concert recently where they had the music of who did the musical score? Williams. John, is it John Williams?
John Williams? Yeah. Oh, that would have been great. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, it was so it was in this nice orchestra hall, and then they had stormtroopers come out, which I thought was pretty random but pretty cool.
yeah there's something in that. And I mean we could probably do a whole extra talk about Star Wars and Islam, like people have, but there are definitely some very clear influences and some some examples of this, the timelessness of the story, that if anyone is interested in Lord of the Rings or Star Wars and they're thinking about Islam, there's actually there's opportunities to explore some of the core threads of story there. In fact, Dr. Samir Mahmood that I mentioned, when I first met him, we gave a talk about it was Islam, Star Wars, and Lord of the Rings. I was like, okay, I've got to be there. And we had this whole, and then he starts talking about khayal and the levels of imagination, and then ultimately wahi, and like it was just a phenomenal talk. So don't discount that little you can think of it as a fun movie, but you can also think of it as like, okay, well, it's a good example of media that will invite us to think maybe a bit deeper about, well, who are these Jedi people? What was the influence behind some of those concepts?
Mm-hmm.
That's a long answer. Sorry, I turned a quick fire question into a mini khutbah. Sorry about that.
No, you made it meaningful. You made it meaningful. Mine was quite mundane, and you made it meaningful, which is I guess, which is exactly, I guess, what you do, right? You're trying to make things meaningful. Okay. Can you ask Peter about his NFT based community project I saw on his Instagram that is to launch, if it is launched? Is that the Tales of Khayal?
So we have two coming up. One of them I can't talk about yet, but the other one is Tales of Khayal. So at the moment, the first content you'll see through the Launch Good campaign next week, inshallah, next week or so, is mainstream kind of conventional type of content, and it's most people interested in that will be pretty straightforward. However, one of the levels that you can back will be for an early access to NFTs that we are inshallah planning to release. So in the last maybe 6 months, our teams started to do some experiments with NFTs. We have actually supported someone close to us in minting and making some very cool, much more wholesome, kind of positive type of NFT collectibles, where because there's a lot of stuff that is just, like in the scene more broadly, there's a lot of content that's, it's not wholesome. It's not where we want to be. I think there's opportunity to do something better with it, more positive. Look at what's the aman of that technology? How can we do something better with it? So Khayal will have some NFT component to it. I want to see how the crowdfund goes first, and then we've got a couple of different strategies of how that will go. And then there's another project we've got kind of baking at the moment, and we've just humbly engaged for an NFT collection, which is connected to, all I can say is connected to Ottoman history. It's a very cool project. That's all I can say, but I can't wait to share that one.
I'm really looking forward. I don't know how I missed that. I'm semi in the NFT crypto space too, so I'm interested
Nice.
too.
Nice. Well, we have a Discord. We've been having a few meetups, Muslims in the Metaverse. We have another one coming up, a Twitter space this week as part of the Global Muslim Impact Forum. So yeah, hit me up. We have our Slack group, Like-Hearted. So we have, over 1,000 people in that. And, it's a really nice community. We've been growing. It just turned 5 this year. So if you're interested in those kind of topics, that's a good one. We also have a Discord, Metaverse Muslims, where some of this conversation is now going on. And another one was kind of born at the same time a couple of months ago, called Muslims in the Metaverse, which I don't run, but very active collective community there. So it's the zeitgeist of the moment. And our job, I think, as always, is to, well, what is our tradition? What are the principles we're adhering to that might inform how we navigate through that? Because a lot of scams, a lot of noise, a lot of money, just misuse. How do we find the good and the benefit in the technology, and just be mindful of, again, that walking that path of being cautious, being optimistic, but hopefully trying to find good in it as well.
Amazing. It's great to see, and I'll be following it absolutely. Second question: favorite game.
Oh man, favorite game. That's a big one. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the first game, The Last of Us. So yeah, The Last of Us on it was PS3, I think, at the time. So yeah, it's more mature themes, of course, but the it's about a story of do I have to do I'm not turning it I'm turning it from a short answer to something much more.
Don't worry.
But it's a great story, the story and the relationship. It's very powerful storytelling, and the environmental design, the dynamics, I think, and the studio. I follow that studio pretty well. So yeah, that's among one of the favorites. But in terms of that style of game, it's a masterpiece. Yeah. There's a book, by the way, called one of my friends put a book out last year, and it's called taste of imagination, video games, and Islamic spirituality, and he explores some of these things in depth. Very cool book. If you're into video gaming, yeah, or someone, it's quite interesting, some of the connections and storytelling parallels that he's uncovered.
Oh wow, that does sound interesting. Final question, and I don't know how interesting this will be to anyone else, but it's interesting for me. Favorite cryptocurrency coin?
Oh man, that's really fun. It's got to be Solana. It got to be Solana. I'm all in on Solana blockchain. I'm not a big fan of the ETH, like gas fees, but just the consumption of energy is so high, and it's not good for the environment. But Solana is, I'm much more into that. We've minted our first kind of project on Solana. Yeah, and it's much greener technology, and I think the applications on it are pretty cool, and the community around Solana is pretty cool. So I feel like it's a different vibe to the big celebrity money, and it's just got a different it feels more grassroots, and it's kind of like the the underbelly of like the makers and people trying to do stuff. So yeah, but it's early days, man. I don't know. No, it's everything changes in 2 weeks, so just learning, right, like everyone else.
Interesting. Yeah. So with Solana, my CTO of our company, he mentioned it in January 2021, and it was like under $1.
Oh right.
And
yeah,
I'm like, yeah, and I didn't take it. I didn't take the hint. And then the price.
because for every one of those conversations, there's 5 others that don't. But this, alhamdulillah, this curiosity that I've had, that many of us probably share. When I finished reading a book like 6-7 years ago called Abundance, and I followed people like Kurzweil, who's the head of engineering at Google, and other things, and I finished that book, and the next day I went out and spent $1,000 in Bitcoin, and it was like 6-7 years ago, and I was like, okay, this stuff's cool, and I don't know what it's going to be, and that was a good decision in terms of like how the growth was, but at the same time, now it's very interesting, the conversations around what is the kind of Sharia understanding of ownership and blockchain. And there's a company we're doing some work for called Marhaba DeFi, very interesting company that have spent a lot of time looking at the governance and Sharia compliance around blockchain. So, and a few other companies emerging doing exactly the same thing. But I think this is quite a cool one. So if you're interested in that space, but you want to navigate what's the fiqh understanding of, well, they've done a lot of research the last couple of years on that. So I feel like we have to have part 2, bro, where we just like talk about metaverse and Web3, and there's some much more capable people that are leading this space, and mashallah, some very successful Muslims that I've seen go deep into this, and I think trying to bring that ethical lens to it, and try to kind of detach it from the hype and the financial flipping that come, but look at, again, what's the benefit to DeFi? What's the benefit? Empowering a lot of people that have been basically, messed by the conventional banking and the international economies and colonial. Like, there's so much that DeFi could do potentially, but remains to be seen how it will play out.
Yeah, we do need a part 2. I don't know how interesting it'd be to anyone else, but it'd be interesting to me anyway.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's fine. I apologize to everyone else that's probably like, man, I'm not spending my Sunday listening to this. So nice to meet you, but I'm out. That's okay. I absolutely no offense taken, but I appreciate Imran's curiosity around this.
It's all my fault. I asked a question. So do you have any parting advice for any creatives in the space who are trying to maybe hold on to their creativity without feeling like they're sacrificed or giving up, or any part of their Islam kind of thing?
Yeah, I think a lot. I mean, that's what this program is kind of that I teach called The Heart of Design kind of grew out of answering questions, particularly from emerging creatives or students that with their parents were like, look, can't you just do engineering and you know, be a little bit, I don't know about, you know, this, you know, there are a lot of questions and uncomfort that there's a lot of missed opportunities by our Muslim communities to, I think, you know, embrace the amana of creativity and imagination. So parting advice is, you know, have creative confidence. So, you know, it's an amana to you. The fact that you get this idea, the fact that you have a dream or you have an idea to grow, you know, would like to work on this product or build this company or, you know, paint this thing or make, you know, I think there's a reason that that's kind of being gifted to you. And if there's, explore that. So it doesn't just mean drop everything and throw, you know, if you're on have a nice career trajectory or you're in professional, you know, I'm not saying that like, okay, it's one or the other, but there we can definitely dial up our level of creative expression and experimentation and creative curiosity and ultimately creative confidence in whatever we're practicing. So lean into that and find the sahba, the companionship that will kind of foster that and encourage that, and know that in an Islamic tradition, there's always has that beautiful legacy and heritage of you know, incredible heights of sophistication in terms of creative output, and inshallah we learn from those and keep applying that to our contemporary experience and benefit others through that effort, inshallah.
Ameen. Thank you so much. I'm conscious of the time. It's getting really late there. I just want to thank you again for taking the time out and having this conversation with the New Beginners community. I'm sure, you know, it was really interesting to hear about the stuff that you're working on and all the learnings that you've had over your 20-year career. So thank you to everyone at New Beginnings for joining, and I hope you all felt inspired and you learned something and perhaps reassured people in similar circumstances or creatives or just navigating the journey of being a new Muslim. Jazakallah khair to everyone. Apologies if I've missed anyone's comments or questions, and I hope that the launch goes well this week, inshallah.
Sure. Thank you so much, Imran, and appreciate meeting all of you. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for listening and being patient, and please, any of you reach out anytime, and inshallah your journeys will be blessed and beautiful and inspiring. And when there's any roadblocks and challenges that we all face, it's, you know, it's all by design. So inshallah, you know, having this companionship is so important. So I really appreciate, Imran, what you're doing with your community and New Beginnings. And if we can help in any way, please just reach out, inshallah.
That's incredibly kind of you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.